right, it's June 25th. This is the Istio Combined Working Group meeting. Looks like I need to do some updates on the notes just to move the agenda for the next meeting to June 25th. But in the meantime, looks like Zerain has a pull request they're requesting review for related to Envoy filters. Zerain, are you here with us this morning?
It doesn't look like he's here, but the PR appears to be on retry budgets and not Envoy filters.
Oh, sorry, misread the line. Give me a moment and I'll open that up and share, and we can just have a quick look together.
Oh, I took a look at this yesterday. It's implementing retry budgets in destination rule, not by the backend traffic policy, the new gateway API resource. How did this get merged? That's
I approved it. It should require two. I always forget how the GitHub approvals work. I thought it required two TOC members, but look, it just requires two approvals, one of which being a TOC member. So apologies for that.
Okay.
I always forget the nuances there.
This proposal was attempted like 3 times in the past 3 or 4 years and was vetoed by TOC every time, which is why we went to Gateway API and did it there rather than implementing destination rule.
Yeah, so we can revert it for further discussion. I would say my reasoning for approving it just because it matches the Envoy data structures pretty well, pretty seamlessly, and for the way that we currently do Gateway API is we use Istio resources, convert everything to Istio resources internally, and just do the translation. So it would need to be in destination rule regardless if you're going to continue that approach. At least that's my understanding. And so this looked fairly non-controversial to me, but yeah, apologies for preemptively merging that. That wasn't my intention.
So
any thoughts? Should we revert?
My memory is short. Can Mike, do you by chance have a link to the agenda where we've discussed this in the past?
I can dig up the prior 3 PRs and we can follow up on this async. Don't revert it yet, but let's follow up on this async.
Okay. We will need to make sure to follow through on that follow-up as API changes are significant. Just as a rule of thumb, we generally require approved design docs for API changes, which I don't see anything linked to this, but it's possible there's one I just hadn't noticed. All right. So that one's going to have offline follow-up. Let's come back here. We have another review request for a pull request.
That's from me. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Mike.
Nice to meet you all. So this is an environmental change for the Helm chart to configure the pod disruption budget. My SR18 here locally decided to extend the chart. And I said, that's bad practice. Now you have to keep it up to date all the time. So why don't we contribute back upstream? That's what this is. So no hurry. I just wanted to get this. Actually, I wanted to join this meeting and introduce myself and see how you guys actually run your working group, because I can learn from you guys. And yeah, I just wanted to contribute this back upstream.
Well, welcome, Mike. We're pretty informal here, but excited that you're finding some ways that we can improve our install and willing to contribute them upstream. So welcome.
Cool. Nice to meet you guys.
John, I know that we had historically some sort of arbitrary ways to affect these values, but I think that was tied to the operator. Is that right?
You could do it in the operator, or you could do it with customize, but
but not with just raw Helm.
Not with raw Helm. Yeah, it's like you use a customized plugin into Helm, so it's kind of wishy-washy whether that's actually viable or not. Yeah, okay. It'd be nice if Helm provided a way to do this, but is Helm.
So this would be the min available, max unavailable, and unhealthy pod eviction policy values added to the Istio D chart. Yeah, the promise of Helm 4, right? Next year in Jerusalem. Let's see.
Yeah, and so the intention was just to get eyeballs on this, and I accomplished this. There's already feedback going on with this, and I'll address it. Thanks.
Okay, that sounds great. I see one request is for adding some tests, although seems to be just on adding a test in a different location. I see, and moving the test.
Yeah, that's fine.
Our testing infrastructure can be a little overwhelming when you first start to use it. So if you run into some problems there, feel free to reach out to any of us in the testing channel or even directly on Slack, and we will help get you unstuck. It's a very powerful testing framework, but with great power comes great complexity. So it can take a little bit of getting used to.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right, next up. What is the right direction of this pull request? Should we remove leader elections? See what we're at. Oh, John, this is the one that you and I were on, isn't it?
No, it's similar, but it's not.
Okay.
Well, if we do it, it will have the exact same concern, but maybe slightly less problematic, but very similar. And that we're moving from a non-revision to leader election to a revision leader election, and the implications that brings.
Okay.
But it's for a different purpose and a different leader election. I can summarize the context here if it helps, even though it's written
That'd
here.
be great.
Do it verbally. Basically, there's a controller that goes in every namespace writes a config map that has a CA cert for Istio. This is respecting this discovery selectors thing. So if you put a discovery selector and don't include namespace foo, it's not going to write to foo. This, because revisions have to have all the same CAs certs, that's like one of our requirements on a revision and one of the decisions we made.
Yep.
We just have a global election for it because they're all going to write the same thing anyway. So why bother with per revision ones, right? It doesn't really make sense. And if you do per revision ones, they're going to be overlapping because in the vast majority of the cases, all your revisions are watching all the same namespaces. But it leaves an edge case where I have the one that wins the election is only watching some namespaces, and other revisions are watching other namespaces, and those don't get the config map version.
How do you change the discovery selectors of an Istio D revision?
It's in mesh config.
Okay, so that can be updated dynamically. It doesn't require a rerun of Helm install or anything.
I mean, generally you would rerun Helm because otherwise, when you do it the next time, it's going to revert it. But it is dynamically updated. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot. Mesh config is really weird. I'm just trying to think if I'm in a scenario where I have discovery selectors that I don't like for one reason or another, what is the process for updating them? It sounds like we would recommend an in-place Helm apply that does not change revisions, but changes discovery selectors.
Yeah.
And then you can do upgrades revision-based with consistent discovery selectors. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically. I mean, if you're really just doing like an ephemeral upgrade, it's like once the config map's written there one time, you're fine. It's only really new namespaces. So like, even if you get into this situation for a short period of time, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
So this is a pretty niche scenario that you can run into. Like, absolutely can happen, but there's a reason why it's coming up now and not 2 years ago.
Yeah.
A clarification before a question. John, you mentioned that we require revisions to have the same CA cert. How does that interact with root CA rotation?
That like they're all use a shared secret. So if you go and update the secret to have 2 root certs, then all of them will.
Oh, that's right. So 2. Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Okay. Got it. The second question is, I may have missed the explanation, but how, if discovery selectors is a mesh config, revision mesh config. Okay. Never mind. Never mind. Figure it, man answered my question.
mesh config is a per revision resource, right?
Yep.
So I can see how the API currently supports setting different discovery selectors across different revisions.
Right.
One response to this could be to simply say, all revisions must have the same discovery selectors. Like that's a requirement of revisions. We already require the same CA certs. Granted, the CA certs are a little bit different in that the API reflects that there is one for all revisions, whereas mesh config implies that there's separate values for separate revisions.
Well, technically, what if you, because you specify different, you can specify different CA certificates in mesh config. So in theory, you could have different CA certs per revision. Your mesh is not going to always work, but I think
That's a different one, Keith. In the mesh config, you can specify other CAs that you'll trust when you
additional CAs. Okay, that's right.
This is just the one that Istio serves its own certificate under. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, thank you for clarifying. That's correct.
I mean, technically, like strictly speaking, you could mount like a file to different deployments and stuff, but like we're way off the path of like standard practice. This is more
right.
you know, capture the flag. Can we break Istio? Not is someone going to do this?
So the core problem here is that
are either calling this unsupported and officially marking it as such, or finding a way to get this PR into good shape and making it safe. Does that sound correct, or are there other options I'm not considering?
I agree. It's kind of saying we should fix it or we should not fix it. But I do agree. Like I am kind of leaning towards just saying it's not supported, but it's also not something that's impacting me, so it's easier for me to say that. But it just seems like an awful lot of complexity and risk for users for a pretty niche scenario that doesn't necessarily have a solid use case, or at least not one that's explained. Like it's not clear why you need to have non-overlapping discovery selectors for different revisions exactly.
Yeah, I can see why, like, I can see the argument that it doesn't seem necessary or useful, and I'd like to understand why users have found it useful. At the same time, I can also see how our API sort of implies that that's allowed by having that specified in mesh config and having there be different mesh configs per revision. Ideally, users can just make use of our APIs without having to extensively grok our docs to understand if the particular values they're setting are allowed or disallowed. If there's something disallowed, then our API should tell them.
I think another way of saying that, Mitch, is if we were building the namespace controller today, would we start with it being per revision?
No, I think we would start with it not being in mesh config, making it a value that applies to all revisions.
Fair.
Maybe I should ask the broader question, or do we know of other values that we don't support diversity across revisions or heterogeneity across revisions?
Service scope and multi-cluster. I think. Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we said that we weren't going to allow different, it's sort of undefined, you have different service scope.
And that's going to come from mesh config too, right?
And mesh config, yep. Yes, trust domain, good call. And there are a couple of singleton things, because mesh config, correct me if I'm wrong, for folks who've been here longer than I have, but mesh config existed before revisions existed.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. So it makes sense that there are certain things in mesh config, and then when you create revisions, it's like, oh, well, some things have to be revisions, some things don't. So you're really missing a singleton config object for the entire mesh or for the entire control plane, regardless of the revision.
Okay, I'll volunteer to ask this, ask for particular use cases here. Actually, let's follow this issue link and see if there's a use case explained there.
Not that I saw, it just sort of explains the problem. the use case motivating the problem.
It's interesting that we have, it seems like we have multiple reports of this issue somewhat suddenly.
The other report was from September 2024. Yeah, same resources. Or sorry, same Istio versions. Still not a use case that I see. Oh, there's actually a PR opened for this back in September.
So it just closed as stale, looks like.
Yep, looks like it.
Okay, and that one, John, your last comment was, can you explain the use case? And it looks like the answer was no. So I can jump on the new one and ask them to explain the use case. Can I recommend we add this to the agenda for next week to revisit, see if we've gotten a valid use case and sort of make a decision on whether we either need to document that it's not allowed and add clarity in our documentation about what needs to be consistent between revisions and mesh config, or we need to support it. The gray area is not great.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we should probably, as a follow-up, sort of call out all the different fields in mesh config and sort of have that as a category explicitly of sort of singleton things that need to be consistent across revisions. It's trust domain, service scope, etc. We're in a situation where our APIs do seem to imply that these things are possible, and our documentation needs to, I think, be clearer to users on what they can expect.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, so let's come back to this tab with the agenda. Next up is a question from Tyler asking for security maintainer reviews. Is Tyler or any of the security maintainers here today?
Yes, I assigned myself to take a look, so I can do this soon as possible.
Thank you. Is there anything that we need to know about right now on it? Or just sort of still need to take a first look there?
Still need to take a first look. Steve, or looks like Keith has a review on that, so you might have more context. I think I looked at this a bit ago, but now no longer have that context.
I know what that is like, let me tell you. Okay. So we'll come back to the agenda. And next up is a question from Yuan Lin.
Hello,
about the issue.
everyone. Yeah, that was from
You're
me.
here. Excellent.
Hello. Yeah, I'm working with Shredas about the issue design and implement the native NF tables for redirections. And currently we have one blockers about the dependencies NF table packages. We need to have that one included in the Istio base images, and that's not quite clear. I have a PR for that because when I try to add that packages into the distro list base image, it increases the image size from 10 megabytes to 30 megabytes. That's not way I expected. So it's not clear what the right way we want to add that packages into distro list.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because it's not, I don't think that it's that the NFT binary is so big that it adds all this stuff. It's that in the chain guard images we use, the way they've compiled NFT happens to link in a bunch of libraries that we don't need as well that then get pulled into the image. because they compile it with like interactive mode enabled, which then pulls in like read line, which pulls in end curses, which pulls in all this other crap. So I did bring this up to the chain guard people because I thought it was a bug, and then they told me how to figure out it was not a bug, and they said like maybe they could remove that, but it's not clear because obviously other people use their packages. So we could either convince them to remove it, build our own package, or just accept that we're going to add it, or have this different image, Istio NF tables versus Istio non-NF tables, but then that's, two things we need to maintain.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I updated the PR install NFT binaries in base and distro list images. The latest commit is separating the distro list package base image into two, the existing IP table one and a new one for NF tables.
I saw a comment in the issue that this was required for RHEL 10 support. What kind of a deadline do we have on this? How soon are our users going to be on RHEL 10 or other versions of Linux that have dropped IP table support?
I'm not quite sure about the target deadlines. We are targeting for the sidecar mode support in upstream to Windows 27, and then the ambient mode table support for upstream Windows 28. So roughly around the time for this October. And currently, I don't have a clear way to test everything in the integration test suite because we also need the code change side to complete, and then we can combine the dependency base image change and the code side new implementation change together, and then we can cover everything in the integration test suite.
Okay. Sorry,
So my question is this the right way we can install that package for distro list base image, or should I put them into the existing IP table one?
So overall, like, it sounds like either of these directions are viable. If it's important to you to have this done in time for 127, obviously the dual image route is going to be the only one that really can be done in time for 127. We won't have time to work with Chain Guard or to build out our own package in the next 2 weeks because that's our code cutoff for 127. I don't think I'm opposed to the adding a new image, but I guess overall that does create some additional sort of test and release burden. My question would be, Yuan Lin, are you and Sri willing to own this in the long run and maintain it? In terms of if there's trouble with the release or difficulties with the image, we can bring ping you on an issue or ask you to join the Slack and you'll help troubleshoot the release? Or is this the sort of thing you're asking to sort of hand over to the Istio community to own?
I'm not quite clear about the release part. That means this base image will only be built when we have an upstream release. Is that the only things that we will be responsible if I took the responsibility for this new NF tables distro list base image?
Yeah, so I think this image will be built every time we run an Istio build. So that includes every pull request as well as daily or nightly builds, then release candidate builds, and ultimately our release builds. John, is that right?
So the base images we build, we have like a job that looks for CVEs, and then we rebuild only when there's CVEs. Yeah. So that job may also need to be updated to look for this new image.
Yeah. So overall, Yuan Lin, my only concern is just ownership. Like, is this the sort of thing that you would intend to actively be working on and supporting over the coming, say, year? Or is this sort of a change you hope to be able to push in and then just make use of and not really have to maintain?
Yes, we will maintain that this table, this base image.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the two image path?
Are we treating that as a short-term thing and that we can fix long-term? Like, it's kind of not optimal, obviously. But actually, now that I think about it, it's not. So I was thinking initially we just have to maintain IP tables and NF tables, but it's actually Z10L IP tables, Z10L NF tables, proxy v2. That's I don't think that's good. That's too much, I think. So I don't know where that leaves us though, but I think I don't think that's an acceptable option. I guess that either leaves us, I mean, like, it's just a couple megabytes, so it's not that big of a deal, but at the same time, it's like tripling the size, and people use distro specifically to get a minimal image, so it just kind of feels wrong. I mean, technically, we could say you can only do NF tables on the non-distroless images, or potentially in the short period of time. It probably doesn't make the rel people happy, because they're people that tend to use rel probably tend to want to use distroless, but like, I think we could easily make our own package in 2 weeks. The bigger problem is maintaining it 2 years down the line. Because we have to be responsible for updating it, and TrainGuard does that for us for free right now. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it doesn't leave much option other than to raise the binary size. Go ahead, Keith.
So yeah, I was going to bring up the different proxies. So I'm glad you already did that. I agree. I think the only feasible option is we pay the penalty of, you have to pay a penalty either way. We pay the cost of in binary size, or we pay the cost when it comes to maintaining our images. We are using help me understand how we're using the TrainGuard images today. We're just sort of using them, and then are we just copying the binaries? Are we installing the packages?
Yeah, so we don't actually technically use TrainGuard. We use Wolfie, and we build our own images entirely ourselves, but based on their Wolfie packages. So you can see like the Acto published, that's like their tool that builds Docker images from Wolfie.
Got it.
And so we take those, we build our base Docker images, and then we shove all the proxy or Z10 or whatever stuff we need to for the per image things. So this is one that is on the screen. This is changing the debug image, or the Ubuntu one. So it's like adding 1 megabyte to 50 megabytes. I don't think anyone cares about that. That's fine. We're really only talking about for the distroless image.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so, go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the distroless one, like, it also, the diff looks like this as well. It's just adding NF tables. It's just they build NF tables with a bunch of stuff that we don't actually need for our build of NF tables. So.
Right. So it's not something as simple as like getting it from a different package manager or a different OS. So like that would require changing our entire build process, correct?
No. So the two options, if we actually want to get rid of it, would be one, you can make your own package. That's our own NF tables that we build our own way without their thing, which would be fine if NF tables was static, but then we have to keep it up to date as it changes and whatnot. Or get TrainGuard to make either the NF tables package not include the stuff, or like a NF tables light package or something. Honestly, if we send a PR to make NF tables light package as TrainGuard, I bet they would accept it. I was gonna say like we're gonna have to do something similar. Like Microsoft got a Linux distribution, we're gonna have to take a look at doing this. Like I was gonna say, if either we could contribute that same sort of process, like a light build process to TrainGuard, or we could potentially use Azure Linux packages potentially as an option. But like that, my mind started going down that direction, and I was asking to see if that was technically feasible. Yeah, so if there's an existing APK, which is like the Alpine Linux package that contains what we want, we don't have to get it from Wolfie. We could get it from our own local one, or like some other repository. But it's not, we couldn't get, like, I assume that Azure Linux is not in that format.
No, we don't use Alpine. We use, I think for Fedora base, we use Yum or TDNF package manager. So it's a different format. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I think maybe just building a NF tables light package might be something worth looking into.
It does look like Alpine itself has an NF tables package.
Yeah, that one also has the same problem.
Oh,
I assume that all of them are going to, because they're not going to ship like the package
Non-interactive mode.
like like half the mode. It's just we only need a small part of it.
it says the size is 326 kilobytes.
It's lying. That doesn't include all the dependencies and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we need a path forward for Red Hat as well as like a long-term path. Yuanlin, what do you think of building our own package? Is that something that's viable for you all in the next 3 weeks?
I'm not sure about that. Are we going to provide our own packages for the to-do list, and the timeline will be in 3 weeks?
That's sort of what we were thinking of is building out our own NF tables package that only contains the things that we need without all the extra dependencies, and then building based off that. That keeps our image size down.
Yep.
It allows the RHEL 10 support that you're looking for, I think, but it also does create some additional burden on the project to maintain that NF tables package or find an alternate in the near future. I'm guessing the chain guard approach, regardless of what contacts we have and how quickly they move, that's not going to be viable by July 17th, right?
Honestly, I'd give it 50-50 shot. Maybe higher if we apply pressure. Like I think the amount of work to do it is like copy and paste. It really depends if they're fine with it or if they have to debate about it. And they've kind of already been primed on this. And there's probably other projects that are impacted by this to some extent. I assume they didn't notice or didn't care about the excess dependencies. But like basically they'll have their own file that looks just like this, NF tables file in their repo. And all we really need to do is copy it, change where it says link read line to link no interactive, or we had just checked the build flag in NF tables.
Yeah.
And send the PR, they approve it, their machinery builds it, it's ready to go. So
okay. Then maybe the best thing is to leave that up to Yuanlin and try to help him in terms of connections with the chain guard community if he doesn't have them already. Yuanlin, I think overall we'd either like to see a compact NF tables from chain guard or a compact package that we've built as part of our infrastructure. Does that sound fair?
Yep.
All right. Can someone, sorry, I'm trying to run the meeting and take notes at the same time, and I'm sort of failing at both simultaneously. Would someone mind documenting that under his item on the agenda while I move us on to the next?
Sure, I'll do it.
So the next item is from Aryan.
Hey.
And let me share the tab and take us away. It's good to have you back, by the way. I haven't seen you in the meeting in a while.
Yep, I was just working on something else. Yeah, I just tried Istio Ambient recently, and the one thing I talked to Keith and John offline on this, I've still like few more questions. So when I try to use Istio's virtual service with Kubernetes Gateway API Gateway, something like this didn't work with Ambient, but somehow it would work for the Istio sidecar-based mesh with the gateway APIs, because sidecars, they are not like the gateway APIs. So the thing is, what is our guidance for the users migrating from Istio sidecar-based to Ambient? That's the first thing. Or they are using the mix and match combination where they have like, one namespace is for Ambient, other one is for the sidecar-based mesh, and they're using virtual services.
Well, I think John and Jackie are leading our migration efforts.
So first thing I want to clarify, is this the right approach to not support virtual service for Istio Ambient? Like this virtual service for Istio Ambient, if somebody's using waypoint of Kubernetes Gateway API gateways.
I don't see a binding in the virtual service, and I would have expected to see that.
I thought we didn't support mixing waypoints and gateway API. Or am I not understanding something?
Yeah, based on this PR, I think we never supported it, but like if for the sidecar based mesh, it is supported, right? Even with the gateway APIs.
Certainly ingress ought to work the same between the two systems. You shouldn't have to change your ingress.
But I think a user can change the gateway, right? Anytime they want.
Yeah, they can. I'm saying that I think you're correct that this is a bug. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yes, Keith.
So let me make sure I understand the question. Are you saying that in ambient mode, when you're you're trying to attach a virtual service to a gateway API ingress gateway, that breaks?
Oh, I'm attaching to a host. Like it could be any Kubernetes service, not the gateway itself. So the same virtual service what is being presented right now. If you see it has host, not the gateways.
Okay. So
Quick question. Did you use the Istio.io waypoint 4 in your service?
Sorry, in my service, you mean like the product page service?
Yeah, like are you telling it to use the waypoint?
No, I don't think I
it's
configured.
a use waypoint label on the service.
Oh, I think I missed that. So do we need to add that label to all the services that are being part of Ambient?
Either the
Or the
services or the
namespace.
namespaces.
Yeah, on the namespace it was there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I could see
So-
like if I created the HTTP route for the same, it was working fine instead of virtual service.
So that's by design. We are wanting everybody, like waypoints, folks, keep me honest here. Waypoints have never supported virtual service. I don't think ever. If it did, it certainly wasn't any more at any level above alpha or experimental support. I don't think we've ever supported mixing gateway APIs like gateway API and virtual service. I don't think that's ever been that's ever worked.
I see.
Not
I
reliably.
was talking to John about the same thing, and he thinks it should be supported, like this virtual service on Ambient, but somehow it is not. So like, but it's somehow supported on sidecars, right? So that is a bug. Like somehow we should stop supporting it on the sidecar as well with the gateway APIs based mesh. If the gateways of
That's a little
gateway
bit different. I think that's a little bit different. So with an ambient, the waypoint is your L7 policy enforcement point. It is your
Mhm.
L7 router. In sidecar mode, the sidecar is the router. So it's not like apples to apples. The gateway API, there's not like a gateway API sidecar thing in
Yes,
sidecar mode.
I get it, but like how would a user use the combination of, like sidecar less in the sidecar, the same mesh, because these virtual services could be common.
You first go to gateway API and HTTP route. Like that's sort of would be the number one step in migration tooling would be to move to HTTP route.
So they have to update all the virtual services to the HTTP routes first. And like a lot of these features are not supported with HTTP routes, what we support with virtual services.
It's a pretty tiny list these days of what's not supported. Like a very small
it's like
list.
3 things. Like fault
Okay.
injection, we're getting retry budget. Like there's not very many.
Then why can't we support virtual service on like Ambient if this is the case? Why can't we do a merge model of like supporting both routes and virtual services?
I want to make sure Lior can go after this, but I'll just say that this is a 2-year conversation. Like we've made this decision a while ago. Frank had that PR open a while ago, and sort of we decided that we weren't going to move forward with supporting both because HTTP route and the gateway APIs are the future. They're the standard APIs. They have a more a better binding model in a lot of cases than virtual service does. Some of the expensive pieces of virtual service are just absent from the gateway API resources. We encourage everybody to go and adopt those. And designing ambient in such a way where you need to move over there is a conscious decision to help encourage users to migrate.
I see. Makes sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was also under the impression until now that like I mean, I hope it's still correct that like just virtual servers are not supported with ambient. But what I'm confused after RM brought it up is like, what parts are supported and what parts are not. So like I'm not really clear on the behavior of like if there is a virtual service in an ambient node cluster, what exactly would happen and what attachment points are expected to be working and what's not.
So the short version, and John, Mitch, anybody else, correct me if I'm wrong or add more color to this, but the way I would explain it is that if the proxies didn't change, the virtual service doesn't need to change. So if you're running a sidecar, you're using virtual service, and you're going to and you don't change the sidecar, virtual service should still work. If you're running an ingress gateway and you are continue to run an ingress gateway, but your service is in ambient mode, virtual service should still work for that proxy, for that gateway. However, if you're going from a sidecar proxy to zTunnel or a sidecar proxy to ambient, you should expect some disruption in that virtual service. And in some cases, virtual service might not be supported at all. That's sort of how I would explain it as a heuristic for what's supported and what's not. And then Stephen linked some specific fields that are missing.
So to clarify, just like to clarify even a more shorter clarification, if I'm starting a new cluster, no sidecars in it, virtual service will be completely ignored. Would that be correct?
No. We would encourage you to use HTTP route, but if you want to create an ingress gateway, you use virtual services to describe the traffic from the gateway to the backend, that should still work. We don't encourage it, but that's
no. But I'm saying, like, let's say I'm using Gateway API, right? Not Istio Gateway.
Then no, because I don't think we allow mixing and match, like mixing virtual service. That's mixing between two different API standards. The API.
I agree. Which is what presented in this screen that we're seeing. So that's the reason I want to clarify. This should not be working because this.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the difference is this is Gateway API, but it's what we don't really support is HTTP route and merging HTTP routes and virtual services, right? Like what I see here looks fine because there's no other way to create a waypoint. You're just making a waypoint and you're attaching a virtual service to it. I think that is supported at least in alpha. So maybe supported isn't the best word, but
so I tested this and it didn't work. So basically this virtual service, didn't reconcile by the waypoint.
So
yeah, I know we say. Go ahead, Lidar.
No, I'm saying like I think there is more confusion right now. Even like to me, like we're saying we're not mixing it, right? So to me, like if I spin up a gateway, regardless if it's a waypoint gateway or it's just like literally, but like it's a gateway API gateway, I'm expecting to be able to attach it an HTTP route and virtual service to not work if we're attaching to it. And just like this is what I was thinking. So I'm unclear like if it should be supported or not still.
I think that's correct. I don't think I know the docs say like virtual service is supported in alpha. But my understanding is that, at least in my experimenting and looking at the code, I don't think we support mixing API families. I think it's always been like that, but I may have missed some of the nuances there.
So I'll just make the observation. I know that we've recently committed, I was trying to find it in the notes, but I can't, which is a little worrisome. We've recently committed to trying to clarify what is supported in ambient versus what is not. We recognize that that's not clear to users. What I'm hearing here is that it's also not clear to our technical oversight committee. So we need to work on creating clarity amongst ourselves on what we intend to support versus what we don't. And only then can we really work on documentation and clarification for our end users on what's supported and what is not.
True. I have one more question on like the mixing API family Keith just mentioned. So I agree, we shouldn't mix like the APIs, but we recently supported the backend TLS policy in experimental, I guess, and that somehow is supported with destination rule. Like somebody has a destination rule, the TLS settings, and this backend TLS policy with some TLS settings. So those two can coexist together. How about that then?
We support generally some policies, maybe more specific. We don't support mixing routing between API families. There are some policies like authorization policy for one. It gets sort of tricky because our implementation of, for example, backing TLS policy uses destination rule. Like it is a destination rule under the covers. We convert between our internal representation and the Gateway API representation internally. So like for Istio, there is no real difference. But and actually do the same HTTP route. That's fair. As far as I don't know. I know for routing, we don't allow like at least we allow an alpha. We say allow an alpha, but my understanding is it just doesn't work, to be honest with you. So to Mitch's point, we need clarification there. But from being on Ambient for the past couple of years, what I've always told people is don't mix like virtual service on a gateway, and don't try to, well, you can't use HTTP route without a gateway really anyway.
I mean,
well, no, you can combine the service. So never mind.
That's true. We can give the general motivation to users like what to use, but what not to use. But if our product supports like APIs in a confusing way, then it could be, not a good UX.
Yeah.
Like some APIs we support together, but like some APIs we do know, we just reject it. So as a user, I don't know what could be supported or what not.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think Mitch already mentioned the action item. Yeah, I mean, maybe the last sentence I would add is like, if any of us know, and if not, it's fine to follow up, is like, because when we say we don't support routing, it's like literally like the code base I'm in front of, like that I'm imagining is the code base where we merge virtual services, right? So then, as we pointed out, like HTTP routes are kind of translated to virtual service behind the scene. When we get into this code, do we actually differentiate between virtual services generated for gateway APIs, and then we say, all right, these are non-mergeable? I doubt I remember some code like this. I mean, obviously we can check after this meeting, but yeah.
And I have like one last question on this. So I know, like, as you mentioned, for networking, we are picking any one of the APIs. For security, we will do a mix and match, I guess. We are like Istio APIs can coexist with the gateway APIs. Is that true?
Yes, because we converted them, I think, 2 years ago to have target refs on a lot of the policy resources. So
Okay.
peer authentication, well, not peer authentication, that's sort of a special special case, but authentication policy, request authentication, telemetry API. Some of the policy resources have a target refs, which means they can work inside within the Gateway API framework.
I see. Makes sense. Cool.
On Leor's question, John, you recently converted the gateway stuff to KRT. Do we just use the internal gateway semantics label to differentiate what's mergeable and what's not?
Yeah, we I'll let John answer, but I think we do. Yeah.
What's mergeable and not?
For what's mergeable and not?
I'm sorry, what are we merging?
So like, let's say you have virtual service, right? And we support virtual service merging, but then do you merge virtual service generated for HTTP routes with virtual service?
We don't merge mesh virtual services, only gateway virtual services. So it doesn't matter if you're not. If you make an HTTP route, you have this virtual service, you end up with 2 virtual services, they won't merge because they're mesh virtual.
Yeah, but like
gateway code, that's in like the old Istio code.
But if you have a virtual service, if you have an HTTP route attached to a gateway,
yes,
meaning not a mesh, and then you have a virtual service attached to, a same gateway, do you merge them on the same host?
Oh, for gateway, not for mesh. Yes, those would get merged.
So regardless of
interesting.
But it's like very hard to do that setup. Like you have to know like our internal naming for like the gateways. Like it's pretty. Like it's easy with mesh because you're not attaching to the gateway or not. So you just create a virtual service, you create an HTTP route. They're both pointing to the service. It seems fine. But how do you make one gateway that you're attaching both an Istio gateway to and a Kubernetes gateway to? It can be done, absolutely. It's just very hard to do, right?
But you also merge on the. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you make your virtual service reference like the internal name that happens to be auto-generated of the the Kubernetes gateway, yes, like they would eventually get merged, but that's like going back to earlier, that's like trying to break Istio, not intentionally using Istio properly.
Well, we should do a session on like all the ways you can break Istio and then publish a paper about it.
I guess so, John. That tells me that I might be misunderstanding. I always thought that we didn't support the mix and match between virtual service and Kube Gateway. It sounds like, at least in the code level, we do.
Yeah, but it's not supported at a product level.
Okay. So it's alpha, I think, is what the docs say. Maybe we want that to be less than that. We'll see. We should come to clarity on it.
The merging is alpha or support for virtual service alone in ambient mode?
Support for virtual service on waypoints, I believe.
Okay.
That's what I saw. A doc that said it. I may be behind, but that was my understanding.
Okay, I've added this to our next TOC meeting, which is a ways out. It's on July 14th. I do think that it's important that we as a project have clarity on our support policies, and then that we make that clarity clear for our users as well, which we're clearly missing on right now. Do we have enough consensus on the issue at hand? Is there more information we need? I'll be honest, I've lost the thread a little bit.
I think the action item is to discuss and figure out what we want to support at TOC, and then we can come to an answer on this particular issue.
Okay. Ariane, I'm sorry for the lack of clarity there. We're working on it.
Thanks. I just got a lot of answers from this discussion. Thanks.
Not all of them were consistent answers, but you definitely got a lot of answers.
Yep.
All right, we're at the end of the agenda and we're at time, so I think that makes this a great time to wrap things up. We'll see everybody next week, same time, same channel.
Thanks.
Yes, bye.
Bye, folks.